Hello, and welcome back to another stream at the Onyx Path Virtual Gaming Convention. Hashtag Onyx Path Con if you're that way inclined. We have a very exciting panel up for you right now, which is about how to create your best characters in RPGs. And we're probably going to cover some of the pitfalls in creating bad characters as well, because sometimes that's a little more entertaining. I imagine this is going to be a combination of a bit of education, information, and entertainment. But we will, of course, be fielding questions from the viewers as well as talking among ourselves. So feel free to get interactive. Anytime you want to ask a question, preface what you're about to say in the chat with question in all caps, and it will help us see it more easily. Now, I will get on to introducing the guests in just a moment, but before I do, very important cause. We do have two charities linked to our convention, and you can find them detailed on onyxpathcon.com. That's the Thurgood Marshall charity, and we also have the Bodhana Group charity. And so far, we've raised over $2,000 for them combined. I would love it if we can get to $3,000 or more by the end of today, the third day of the convention. That would be wonderful. Even if you can only donate $1, that is greatly appreciated. Believe me, it is. And you get that satisfaction of seeing the bar in the top right of the screen go up and up and up every time you make a contribution. So that's nice. If you're thinking of gifting a subscription to someone viewing, that is a lovely thing to do. But just remember, you could be giving $5 to charity instead. And we're not doing this for subs. We're doing it for charity. Likewise, if you're interested in RPGs, and I assume you are, otherwise you wouldn't be here, we have lots of discounts on games, so you can take advantage of deals while they're up. Again, go to onyxpathcon.com. There are lots of deals available for you right now, both in terms of PDFs and hardback books. Final thing, and then I will get on to my very patient guests, and that is that as part of this panel, we will be having a giveaway of a free RPG by the end of it. And you know what? If I had been on the ball, I would have been able to tell you what the giveaway was. So I am now going to check while talking without interruption or deviation, and I will be able to tell you that it's a They Came From Beneath the Sea PDF. There we go. Now, I should have known that because that's my game. Yeah, you'll be able to get a PDF of that, and that is actually a game you will get a PDF of before it is out on general release. So about 2/3, 3/4 of the way into this panel, we will be communicating with the people in the chat, and we will be asking them to all send up a signal if they want to be entered into this raffle, at which point you may well find yourself the winner of a free They Came From Beneath the Sea PDF. And not only that, Aloy Lasanta, one of our guests who we will get onto in a moment, is throwing in at least one of his fantastic role-playing games as well.
Yeah,
And
I
in
think
fact,
for this panel, Part-Time Gods is probably the best one.
well, let's do the introductions. Aloy, by all means, please tell the viewers who you happen to be and about your work.
Oh, well, I'm Aloy Lasanta. I am the owner and operator of Third Eye Games, which is largely me. But I'm also the co-founder of New Agenda Publishing that I founded with Jerry Grayson and Misha Bushyeager. And I've been making games for over a decade now. I did the math. I was like, what? Lots and lots of games I've made. Part-Time Gods, Apocalypse Prevention Inc., Ninja Crusade, Sins of the Father, Pip System, Mermaid Adventures, all this stuff. I've also obviously worked on some Onyx Path stuff, which is why you guys had my contact information. And yeah, I've worked on a ton of things. It's a ball. I love doing what I do. So
Oh, glad to hear it. And going on to another one of our panelists, we have Lisa Penrose. Lisa, please, by all means, introduce yourself and what you do.
That's me. I'm Lisa Penrose. I am a writer, streamer, host in the realm of Dungeons and Dragons, primarily. I am the brand manager of a site called Dungeon Masters Guild, where folks can publish their own licensed 5th edition D&D stuff and things, anything you can imagine. And then I also host a podcast called Behold Her, which documents the femme gamer experience.
awesome. And she's my roommate.
Yeah, we were roommates. Wait, gosh, like 2 years ago?
It's been a long time,
It's been
but
a long
yes,
time. Time has no meaning anymore, though.
but we were roommates at a con.
Could have been
so.
yesterday. Yeah.
Okay, that makes more sense. I was like, Lisa?
It's like this is the kind of reunion
about
that
you.
happens. A reunion that happens before a murder mystery occurs. Hang on, don't I recognize you from somewhere? Wait, where did that body come from? And
no.
speaking of the body, unfortunately, TK Johnson may be the
Oh,
victim
yeah,
in this
for
dreadful
Why
mystery.
am I not the murderer?
Maybe you're both, and that's the twist.
You know
You were
what?
murdered by yourself?
Yeah,
What?
it was
Interesting.
intended for someone else. Maybe because the man behind the curtain here is Travis Legg. It was intended for him. But sadly, you swallowed your own poison. But other than that, TK, how are you? Who are you? And
I'm
what
not
do you-
liking that I'm still ending up dead at the end of this analogy, but it's me. It's TK. I write spooky stories on the internet. I am a dungeon master, writer, editor. I'm really loud on Twitter. People like that. Yeah, that's pretty much me. I thought I was best friends with Lisa, but now I'm like wondering about all the secrets she has.
Not everybody likes their roommates. Just saying. Like,
Okay.
Yeah, this panel has taken a strange turn, but I mean, we could keep following it, but probably not. Those of you watching probably know who I am just because it's on the Onyx Path Twitch channel. But if not, my name is Matthew Dawkins. I'm the in-house developer for the World of Darkness game lines, and they came from beneath the sea at Onyx Path. I also work for companies like Chaosium, Paradox, on board games, card games, video games, as much as I can. So I keep busy, but right now the focus is on Onyx Path Con, which is where we are now, and the subject of our panel, which is creating your best character. So on that note, let's actually start with a big topic. And I think it's going to be a big topic partly because of the political issues of the day that have been political issues for a very long time, but they're highlighted right now. And it is something that comes up often in role-playing games. Namely, how, or if you even should, can you appropriately play a character from a different culture other than your own? And mainly speaking, in a contemporary setting. So we might be looking at the World of Darkness. If you're looking at D20, you could be looking at something out of print like D20 Modern. Something like that, modern age maybe. But a character of a culture or background, even a gender that isn't your own. So it's a big question, but let's start with it. I'd like to actually go to TK first. How would you go about writing a character like that to play play yourself?
So I think the biggest issue that makes this question so hard to answer is that it's so broad. It's like, how do you play someone different from yourself? Well, I could play a Black biracial, say, person who identified as a man, grew up in the exact same place and everything, and yet my perspective would be different. But that's not the same as playing, like, say, a Native American or something like that. A lot of it's going to depend on the setting of the story, like, and beyond contemporary dark fantasy, where are you? Because playing a Native American in urban New York City or Manhattan is way different than playing a Native American just outside of Seattle or in Minnesota or in Michigan. So I think that if you're going to play a person who is different, essentially play and portray a culture different than yourself, you need to really ask yourself, like, am I playing a Black man or am I playing a dark-skinned person? Because the culture there's such a divide. Do you know what I mean? It's like, am I playing a Black man or am I playing a person of African descent? Now that's still two very different things. Like, are you now an immigrant? Are you now, what's going on? There's so much just in the world, because we still live in a world where people are marginalized because of where they're from or because of who they are or how they were born. It's hard. So my things, baby steps. if you want to kind of journey outside your skin, first of all, make sure you're not doing some oppression tourism. I know a lot of people like to play tieflings and orcs because they're like, oh, I want people to be mean to me in town. Don't do that. It's gross. It's like, don't do it. Maybe instead of doing that, give $5 to your local charity. But figure out like how far you want to go. Like, do you want to play a hijabi because you want people to see that you're a hijabi and experience that? You really don't. Nobody really likes racism in books. So do a little bit of research. If you have hijabi friends, ask them their perspective. Some of them don't like being portrayed as costumes or as a fantasy expedition. Talk to your friends. If you got brown friends, talk to them. That's how I'd go about it personally.
That's excellent. And moving over to Lisa, on the same subject, let's, I guess, alter the question slightly. This time you're GMing a game and you want to create a setting that is diverse, that does contain as much diversity as, let's say, a city such as Chicago. And this is something I had to deal with when writing Chicago by Night or developing Chicago by Night. How do you go about populating a city in such a way with characters that are believable and actually demonstrate cultures in that way?
Well, I think when you're creating characters who come from different backgrounds in general, especially if they're inspired by the real world, you have to just, there are people in real life have their background as part of them, but they're also just a human being. So I think, and especially in a diverse city like Chicago, there's people from all backgrounds, and some of them might consider their background of a bigger or smaller part of who they are in their day-to-day life. So I think you can have diversity just for realism's sake. Like someone, if you have an Asian character, you don't necessarily need to change how they're acting as a human being. You don't need to play into like tropes or anything like that. They can just happen to be Asian in the setting and be described in that way. And there isn't necessarily always something special you need to do about that to have in an Asian or gay or Black character. That could just be a part of who they are.
And Aloy, so again, branching out from the topic a little further, when you have characters like this in your game, and it's always a good idea to do so if you want to present a broadly diverse setting, how do you go about presenting them? I guess I know we've kind of covered it from a few angles, but I'm thinking of not only how do you present them in a way that isn't stereotypical, and also to players who may fall into a perfectly natural but unpleasant trap of portraying a character in a stereotypical way. How do you, I guess, dial that back? How do you recover from something like that?
Well, I'll say first that Lisa kind of stole my answer. That's how I've always kind of written any characters that I would create for a game or for a story or anything. Like, you write them as people, and they might have these, attributes that make them slightly different from some of the other characters, but that doesn't necessarily inform, their decision making or makes them different or special or anything. It's just like, it's like a man walks into a bar. Well, what was his race? That didn't really matter. The joke is the bar, and he walked into it. Like, it's like, come on now. So that's part of that. Now, when it comes to like getting people to stop messing around with tropes, a lot of the time, I think I said this in the last panel, that I can be snarky as a GM. And if they start playing into tropes, I will start calling them out on it. Like, why are you talking like that? Like, and I'll do it in game.
Yes.
Like some of the other some of the other characters in the game will be like, why are you talking like that? Like no, because it's not even a race thing. It's just people fall into the thing. I had a character I had a player who was like a ghoul for this vampire, and he like goes, I'm like, yeah, so like it's set in Detroit, and like, you know, it's modern day, and he goes and he's like, master, and I had the vampire go, what are you doing? And it's just like, oh, I'm here to serve you. It's just like, I have, why are we talking like this? Because I'm not talking like that, and I'm the actual vampire. So what's wrong with you? You know, so it's like, you know, so people fall into that trap of kind of stereotypes, and, you know, they learn from movies and pop culture and stuff, and they think that that's the way that it is, as opposed to, I guess, taking social cues and like context from the environment and stuff like that. So yeah, so anyway, I also think that, real quick, I love the additional diversity that I'm seeing in a lot of the game designing and settings and whatnot. But I have actually worked with some writers who want to take that even further when it comes to it. And what I mean by that is, like, in Part-Time Gods second edition, I have a character. Her name is Penelope Rivera, and she's of Puerto Rican descent, and she's a bartender, and she's great. And somebody's like, well, you know, she could probably like represent, you don't have enough Asians in your game, so, you know, Puerto Ricans actually have they're like part Asian and stuff, so she could be maybe connected to a China. And I'm just like, or she's just like Puerto Rican, but she doesn't even really pay attention to the Puerto Rican part of her life. She doesn't really care. That is just kind of a piece of her, and she's kind of a reflection of me, because I am part Puerto Rican, and I don't know anything about being Puerto Rican, but I am. But, you know, not everybody is like 100% attached to their origins, you know, especially as a Black person, like, because we don't even know a lot of our origins, kind of like what TK said, like being Black and being of African descent are completely different things. So yeah, I'll stop. I'm sorry. You should just never come to me, because I'll ramble forever.
No, well, we're here to ramble, and it is incredibly insightful, and I think it's greatly beneficial as well to the viewers, because this is going to be information a lot of them have never heard, and sometimes role players don't even question it. I remember I think the last real life convention I attended, I was walking around one of the gaming halls going toward the snack bar or something like that, and I heard one of the players at a table that I was passing putting on a dreadfully racist sort of Indian subcontinental accent. And this was a white guy, oldish white guy. And even the players around him looked uncomfortable at this. And I do hope one of them called him out for it. But it did bring to mind the fact that, yeah, if it's something sometimes I fall into. I don't do Indian accents if I'm playing Indian characters, but I certainly put on inflections.
Yeah.
I certainly may try and alter my cadence or similar to evoke some culture or other, and it's something that for the most part is completely unnecessary. If you want to convey a character, you don't need to put on a silly voice to make it seem authentic. You know, it's why we role play. It's not we're not here in voice acting.
I've been lucky enough to just be bad at accents my whole life, so I never fell into doing any of that. So
You're never tempted.
like, I'm not even tempted, because I'm just gonna butcher whatever I'm trying. So
Yeah, for Tales from the Mists, the Vistani all have like the basic Eastern European accent, but none of the villains do. None of the villains have an Eastern European accent, because we do a podcast, so I don't want listeners to get confused in thinking that any of the Vistani are bad people.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm glad that you brought up the Vistani and Tales from the Mists, actually, which is the show that TK and I are both on, because there might be, especially older games, games that take inspiration from real world cultures. And I feel like in games now, if that makes you uncomfortable for whatever reason, like, you don't have to keep the lore. Like, if you're playing a game, like, it's your game, you can change things, and that's something that TK and our Vistani character in the game worked a lot on,
Yeah,
to change.
we just threw away.
Yeah.
Yeah, instead of being wandering drunks and child thieves. They are an underground revolutionary corps that is fighting against oppression in Land of the Mists. So it's very like Eastern European freedom fighter energy.
It's that entire we'll get back onto I guess the main topic, but this is an interesting avenue to go
I dig
down.
that though. That sounds good.
Because I remember when I guess Baldur's Gate came out, the original, and then Baldur's Gate 2, and they're fantastic games. That's where the very first thing I started coding was for romance mods for Baldur's Gate 2, and
Yeah,
I
you
remember,
did.
and I remember the character of Edwin Odysseron, the Red Wizard of Thay,
okay.
can join your party, has a very, very stereotypical Russian accent. I can't fault the voice actor; it's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Stereotypical Russian accent. But I think then, in all subsequent Forgotten Realms video games, all Red Wizards spoke with these Russian accents.
Yeah.
All the red wizards, I get it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It does make you wonder where these were informed, whether someone just tried to impose a map of Faerun onto a globe and say, well, Fae's roughly where Russia
for
is.
sure. And that was a big problem with TSR, where they were like, I don't know about this. But
I mean,
what
I don't happens a lot of
the Russian though.
Yeah, what happens a lot of the time as writers and creators is you try to find shorthand to get across like your idea quickly. You know, and a Russian accent is a really easy way to throw on some stereotypes for that an American reader would have of that.
Yeah,
or English,
so
for sure.
Yeah, I mean that doesn't make it a good choice. But it's almost like it's just like oh, there's a character and it's a bow in her hair. Oh, so that that must be the girl and must have all of the regular female traits associated with them because they have a bow in their hair. And like that bow is just shorthand for this one's a girl. It's
or
like
eyelashes, big eyelashes.
Or eyelashes. Like what? Boys can't have bows and eyelashes? Come on now.
Boys have the biggest eyelashes.
So I've got a question from the viewers. I'm not sure which of us it's aimed at, but I'm sure whoever it is will answer. The question was, in the first episode of Silver and Steel, you were asking questions to the characters and modifying stats according to how they answered. Is that part of the class modifier module?
I think this might be TK and Indoor Recess rather than Silver and Steel.
Yeah. What you're thinking of, for Silver and Steel, you're thinking of that bronze chick. You're thinking of Jasmine. Oh gosh, I hope her name is Jasmine because I was so sure, and then I'm so dumb. Anyway, bronze. You're thinking of her. But you're also thinking of me for Mythic Odysseys of Theros with Indoor Recess. Yes, I used Gabe James's class modifier module available on Itch.io.
There you go. So I've got a nice general question, and it's to do with another commonly used trope in character creation, and that is all my family are dead and I'm therefore hungering for revenge. So this is something a lot of very new role players come into, to be honest, experienced role players do it as well. It's an easy Batman-esque fallback, Spider-Man, pretty much any superhero story, a lot of them anyway, is everyone I know and love has died, therefore I'm out for revenge/justice. What I'm interested in from each of you is how to make that trope interesting, how to make it novel. So yeah, and I'm going to do a bit of wind up so you can have a bit of a think about it before I suddenly cast it to you. But if we think about that origin, it's represented plenty of times throughout literature, throughout media in general, movies, video games. So it shouldn't necessarily be denied to role players, even though a lot of people look at it and think, that's lazy storytelling. So let's come at it from an innovative perspective. What's a good way of making the I've lost everything character interesting? Let's go to Lisa first this time. No pressure, Lisa.
I mean, I when I create characters, I love taking tropes and then figuring out some sort of twist to make them different. Sorry, I'm distracted. My kitty cat's little face just showed up in the corner. That was so cute. So as soon as you presented this challenge, like the gears start moving. I feel like typically in that trope, it's that your ultimate and like your personal arc, your big bad evil guy, is the one who has caused this mayhem and tragedy, and you are kind of journeying for revenge on them. But I think I wonder if like somehow it was like tragically your fault. I feel like that could be an interesting twist on it. And I immediately went to like in Dungeons and Dragons, for instance, there's warlocks who have this relationship with a patron. And I wonder if somehow it was actually your patron who caused you to lose everything. And then yet you're beholden to them and you gain power from them. And if you're trying to get revenge on your patron, you're kind of gaining power from them as you level up in order to eventually defeat them. I think that could be really cool. It's just very specific idea.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask the same question because I'm actually very interested in seeing whether we can get 3 different responses on this. So I'm going to put the same question to Aloy now. So yeah, revenge-fueled character.
Gosh, I think my biggest thing would be I would probably want to focus on why revenge is the thing that they're going after. What were the circumstances of your family dying, and then why is revenge your answer? And I would probably want to explore that a little bit with the player to figure out what it is that they're trying to get out of this game, because that storyline works really well when you're telling the story of a single character, but not so much when that character needs to be mixed with a whole group at the table.
Yeah, it often goes to the lone wolf kind.
Exactly, and that is an annoying character to be in a group with. So, so that would be my main thing. Like as a GM, I would be like, so what is it? Why is that? Like, oh, my whole family was slaughtered. Slaughtered by who? Oh, well, that guy, the king did it. The king did it. All right, cool. So how do you believe that you're going to be able to get through into the throne room to kill the king? It's just like, I would basically go through all the questions that theoretically he would ask himself.
Yeah.
In his own head, to the point where he might be like, well, maybe revenge isn't the thing that I want. Maybe I just want to reform law. And I'd be like, cool. Well, then how about we change it from revenge storyline, lone wolf revenge, to maybe you're with this group and you're trying to get to the legislator's office so that you can appeal to them and then have laws change that you can actually hold the king accountable for. I mean, who knows what the whole thing is, but like I would not try to make that the trope itself novel. I would be like, let's try to make it a different trope because that's boring.
Yeah, I mean, what you were saying kind of brings to mind, what was coming to my mind was The Princess Bride, and the fact that even though the characters that end up joining the party at the end all have different reasons for going to the castle, one of them is definitely going for revenge. Inigo Montoya is a vengeance-fueled character, albeit one that's likable, but he still works alongside his compatriots because they're all having a reason to work together, and there's something he can build up to afterwards.
Yeah,
it isn't a character where once vengeance is complete, everything's gone, and now I'm just going to walk off into the desert kind of thing.
I think also too, one of the things that I would probably ask the player would be, because again, I'm all about complete open communication with all, any of my players. I'd be like, is this a goal that you want to actually achieve in the game? Or is this just something that you want to have as part of your background? Because if it's like, I want to kill the king, and I'm like, well, you probably won't be able to. Is that something you really want to do? They'd be like, no, I think I just want to really hate the king. And they'd be like, cool. All right, well, then we need to figure out other motivation to go alongside that. But if your goal, like in the game, is to kill the king, well, then as the GM, I have to try and at least give you the opportunity to try. I'm not going to say you'll do it, but I have to open up, parts of the story to at least give you that door that you could possibly do it.
And
all right, I'll stop. You can move on.
Honestly, you don't need to apologize. What about you, TK? Do you have anything else that you'd like to add to the idea of the vengeful lone wolf type?
Almost every time that I have a character who wants revenge, I do the Princess Bride, where I tie it into the main storyline somehow. Because this, I will give their villain as well to like another character as well. So that's like now you have two people who have to work together. It's very like Street Fighter or Conan the Barbarian, where it's like, oh, the bad guy's an asshole for multiple reasons. Can I say asshole? Whoops.
You can say whatever you like. It's
but it's very much like, because the big problem with someone having a revenge is not that they want revenge. Even as much as I, the DM, want to like put in an NPC that's like, don't you understand? Revenge will destroy you as a character. This isn't a movie. This isn't a book. This is my friend wanting to play a game and pursue a path that they would not normally pursue in real life. And it is not my responsibility, but the expectation is that I at least give them the benefit of the doubt with that. Now, it does tend to lead into lone wolf tendencies. And so to counterbalance that, I need to give them a reason to stay. Give them a reason to stay with the group. And that means tying their villain in with somebody else's villain. And now you have at least one person in the group that you will almost always agree with or at least interact with. And now you have a reason to stay with the rest of the group.
That's good. And I completely agree with you with the Street Fighter thing. And it just always brings up the
such
scene.
Such a good speech.
Yeah, with Raul Julia, like, you know, that moment was a turning point in your entire life. And for me, it was Tuesday.
It was Tuesday. It was only Tuesday. It's such a good speech. And then the riddle of steel speech that Tulsa Doom gives Conan at the end, where he's like, who would you be without me? Like, who am I if not your father? And so I was just like, so good.
This may be the very first panel I have been on, and Street Fighter has been referenced a number of times on many panels for various reasons, where the movie has been credited for anything. So
well, okay, so let's get it straight. It's not a good movie, but Raul Julia acted his butt off in that movie.
Gosh, that scene is so good. It's the only one I remember from that movie. And I've seen that movie at least 5 times. I remember nothing else.
Oh my goodness. TK, you said something about how the problem isn't that the character wants revenge. The problem isn't necessarily that part of the trope, but I feel like that trope comes with like a very particular personality type. Usually that can be kind of annoying for the party. But I feel like you could have that background and that motivations and like a completely different personality that people don't usually associate with the trope. You could be, because you've lost everyone, maybe you're actually an extremely friendly person who's looking for friends and family. Maybe you're not a dark, brooding badass, but actually someone who's really jumpy and scared about things. Like you'd like revenge, but also like that seems dangerous, and you've been
or maybe like this person took everything from you, so you do anything in your power to keep the people close to you. In fact, almost making yourself into a different type of person, because you'll do anything to hold on to the people in your life. So that's like the burgeoning story for another type of villain.
Well, we've got some more questions from the viewers. So this one from C. Kane Live is it okay to stereotype one's own culture? And so I'm actually going to volunteer an answer at this point first, if I may. And that is, I don't mind stereotyping my culture such as it is, because my culture, it tends to be on the oppressor side of history. So portraying a white British person in a negative light and playing up to stereotypes, while not particularly nuanced, isn't going to, I don't think it's going to upset anyone at a table, especially not in any meaningful way. But my feelings toward other cultures would generally be to stay away from stereotypes, but ultimately that's that's, I guess, down to the purview of the players and GMs in question. So we can quick fire this one, but what do you think, TK? Is it okay to stereotype one's own culture?
I say always punch up.
And what about
Always
you,
punch
Lisa?
up. So
Oh,
if you're
sorry.
down low, punch up.
Yeah.
This is a hard question for me to answer because if I'm answering personally, like I just wouldn't.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't want to. So, and I would probably feel uncomfortable if someone else of Asian descent was at my table and their character was a stereotype. That's
No,
my
I think
personal
that's
answer.
a perfectly reasonable answer. And what about you, Aloy?
Here's my answer. Most stereotypes are rooted in truth. So what I will say is, if I made an NPC that was like my brother, then, I would immediately start talking like this, know what I'm saying? And I'd be like, brother. And to someone else, that might seem like I'm stereotyping that character, but that's my brother.
Yeah.
It's like, I know people who fall into those stereotypes. The problem is when you think everybody is like that. There are people like that, but that doesn't mean everybody needs to be like that. So the question of, is it okay to stereotype one's own culture? Obviously, no. You should stay away from stereotypes. But that doesn't mean to stay away from anything that could be, not just speaking perfect English all of the time, and that's all we do, because that's not life. So whenever I create other characters, I honestly look around to the people in my life, and a lot of the time I end up portraying them at the table, and that's not me stereotyping, even if it could be seen as that. That's just me. That's the truth of what it is to be a human being. We are all different. We all have, all have different stuff about us.
It's a trait a lot of humans have, that when we spend a lot of time around people, we start taking on certain aspects of their the way they conduct themselves.
Yeah.
Sometimes that comes to even we even appropriate accents unintentionally, and again, speed, rhythm, things like that, and that's not stereotyping. That's just what we do as humans. And just to say to CK in Live, because you clarified that you're a white American living in London, don't worry, none of this comes with any judgment from us. This is purely advice, anecdotal from our own heads. And yeah, if you want to play a white American living in London in a game, I don't think there's many people that are going to be offended by that, but certainly you do just need to be aware of context and your surroundings and the people you're playing with. Yeah. So we've got lots of other questions, so I will hustle along.
Okay.
We've also got, let's see, what tropes do the panel think should be explored more with characters? So this panel's kind of gone on to tropes and characters, and I don't think that's a bad thing. So let's start with you, Aloy. What trope would you like to see explored more with a character? Well, with characters.
You know what? I'm a big fan of playing. I don't know. That's a hard question because, tropes are, specifically almost something to be played against. But I actually really like people who try to take a trope and try to have fun within the trope. Like, I hate playing vampire, and they're like, I want to be the nicest Brujah ever. And I'll be like, well, then maybe don't pick that one then, because that's like not what they are. Like, it's like, no, but I want to play like, a completely animalistic Ventru. I mean, but you just want to be a gangrel. Yeah, but I want domination. But that's not.
I see the problem. It's something oddly you don't come up with in most games of D&D and Pathfinder. You don't get many wizards with 18 strength and 8 intelligence.
Yo, mercy though. The first Dark Lord we ever fought, Lisa's sorceress ran up and punched her in the face. Sorry,
I'm surprised by how surprised you were by that. But yeah.
No, but let's switch to you, TK. What about you? Are there any well-trod literature, media tropes that you'd like to see explored more in RPGs?
Yo, I got 3.
Oh,
Number
whoa.
1, found family. I love it. I love found family. Number 2, enemies to allies. Number 3, redemption arcs.
Of redemption arcs.
I
Yeah?
love redemption arcs, especially when like the villain doesn't always have to be like a person who is like the end of the world. I read a one shot that I want to believe is in Seasons. I'm not sure, but it was a necromancer who was a priest who could not. They were a cleric who could not save a village from like a plague, so they reanimated all of them to like try and figure out what the cure for the plague was and stuff. And so it was out of guilt that they became a necromancer, out of their desire to preserve life. And so it's like what a cool arc you could have with a person like that, you
Yeah, yeah.
know, getting them through their own grief cycle and stuff. Like it doesn't always have to be walking into a monster's house and just killing them.
Mm-hmm.
So I love a redemption arc. I love a found family. Love an enemies to allies trope. Want to see more of it. I want to see
I
all of
just
it.
like TK's answer. Don't even come to me.
All right, you can catch up on some sleep.
I'll actually add on top of that though, but I actually love the idea of characters who have families.
Yes,
Yes.
characters
Yeah.
with families.
Like, because that's
Yes.
that's a big part of part-time gods is, you know, you make your character and then you might have a wife and kids and all that stuff. You still got to do your job, and you know.
yes,
Yeah,
I
More-
love
I'm
that.
a huge
I love
fan
it.
of that.
More
Yeah.
and more tabletop games are going toward that. It does seem like the way trends in gaming have kind of ebbed and flowed. For a while, there was just no focus on it at all, or the expectation was that if you had a family, they were back home and you never interacted with them.
Right.
But now
Love it.
it's as if game designers are realizing, oh, hang on, not only is this an emotional crutch, it's support, it is risk, it's someone you can fight
Yes.
for. There's so much you can do with family, friends, colleagues. And if you're looking at a game like Vampire, the loss of being able to see these people in the same way as you used to. Now they are potentially, you may
Yes.
love them, but they are now, in another sense, assets, because they are your cover. They are what allow you to still survive. So, yeah, I completely agree with that.
We love
So,
a emotionally intelligent hero.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So we've got another question here. In FRPGs, so fantasy RPGs, so like D&D, what is your point of view on decolonizing, removing of certain racially, culturally insensitive tropes and ideologies from content? More specifically, so this is a big question. Well, it was a big question to begin with. More specifically, the rules from a mechanical standpoint, change tying stat bonuses to Ancestry, or dismantling and separating Ancestry and culture from the concept of race. Should note, in legend lore, which we've got on Kickstarter right now, we don't refer to races, we have peoples, many of which you nominate to join. But I think that it's a very pertinent question. And again, going to let's go to Lisa, because she managed to skip out on the last one.
Yeah. I am personally 100% for it. And if it's something that your table wants to do, oh gosh, she just ripped my headphones out of my ears. That hurt. And if it's something your table wants to do, there are lots of tools actually that exist now that allow you to do that. For example, on Dungeon Masters Guild, there's a title called, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Grazalax's Guide to Ancestry, which breaks down a totally different system for assigning like beginning stats, and part of its nature and part of its nurture. It gives a bunch of examples. It gives you rules on how to create ancestry for any type of background that your character might want to have. And then there's a bunch of follow-up titles that are like Fey Ancestry or Monstrous Ancestries and such. So like there's tools at your disposal to make that process easier too.
And what do you think, TK, on the same subject?
It's very hard to divorce games that have a foundation in war games from decolonization, because imperialism and walking into somebody else's house and killing them and taking them their stuff is very much, if not in the mechanics, it's in the game's culture. That said, it's not impossible. It's just you have to be very vigilant. Grasslax's ancestries, great stuff. The class modifier module that I use for Mythic Odysseys of Theros, it takes those 3 extra stat points, takes them from race and puts them in your class. So basically you're going to ask questions of your players and be like, what would you do in this situation? Depending on their answer, you assign that bonus stat point.
Oh,
And
I
you can do
like
it with
that.
3 different, you could do it with 3 different questions. And it's very much like, how does your character approach this? And you do it at character creation. It's awesome. It really like divorces those stat points away from bioessentialism, which I am not a fan of. But I am a fan of like divorcing away from it. Bioessentialism is not a requirement in a 2020 fantasy world. It's just not. We could do anything. You could be anybody. But unfortunately, a lot of fantasy books are still like, oh, humans get these extra stats because you can be anybody and do anything.
Yes.
When you're human.
Mm-hmm.
And then everybody else is kind of like, whatever.
Just before I get on to you, Eloy, just so everyone's aware, we're about to do the drawing for the They Came From Beneath the Sea giveaway. So if you wish to be a part of that, please just make any comments in the chat just to signify to Travis that you are here. There's also a copy of Part-Time Gods up for the raffle. So I would suggest, Travis, that you're drawing for, let's draw for 2 different people. It's unfair for one person to get everything. So 2 prizes.
Totally. 2 different people.
Yeah, 2 prizes on offer. And that giveaway will be happening soon. And look at the chat suddenly burst into motion. Or
you know what? Draw for 3. I'll give away 2 copies. I'm feeling very generous today.
Eloy is indeed a very generous person.
I try.
So while that's going on, I'm going to try and cover as many questions as possible. So I hope you don't mind, Eloy. We'll skip you on that question.
It's cool because I was going to ramble a lot about that one. So that's good. But let's skip it because otherwise we'll run out of time.
All right, so you're going to get the first question next, which is, for historical games, how do you really try and make sure that you're portraying the historical racial tensions without being an asshole?
You can't. Because historical racial tensions, like the person who's making that happen, they're an asshole. Like you can't. But I think also though, there's a certain mindset, right? Because we as modern thinkers and we know that that's bad, but guess what, they knew it was bad back then too. They just didn't care. So it's bad regardless. I guess the only thing that you can do is make sure that the player realizes that it's not you doing it, and they don't attach any negativity to you as a person because you're doing something that would be historically accurate, I guess. But also, why are you playing that game? Like, that just seems like a bad game to play.
I mean, if I may call out a game for a second, this is a common problem that's occurred with Deadlands by Pinnacle Entertainment. And they've made efforts to change this for the newest edition, and yet it's embedded in the game's history that this was a thing, I'm afraid, that there was a large player contingent that would play the members of the Confederacy, which is, there's no moral grayness to the Confederacy, despite their uniforms or lack thereof. So there's still the desire, however, from certain player standpoints to play characters like this with nuance, or if you're the GM, portray NPCs of this faction with nuance. So
to go just to touch on that ever so slightly, I'm so sorry.
No, go for it.
I don't actually even have a problem with people from the Confederacy being represented and all that stuff because they have all of that stuff attached to them. It's kind of the difference between kind of the stuff that we're talking about right now, and we're trying to call more attention to it right now. There are outright racists, and then there are just people who allow racism to happen. And that is a spectrum. So for instance, if you were to play somebody from the Confederacy, but you're, not necessarily out there 100% fighting for slavery, but you're kind of okay with the idea of slavery, like it's kind of weird, right? Because it's socially acceptable back then to just be okay with the idea of slavery.
Yeah.
So I don't think it necessarily makes that person a bad person because they are, like we here in America, we're like, you could never eat a dog. But then there are other countries who are like, no, dogs are tasty, and we judge them for that. But
I would
it's that sort of
absolutely eat a dog. I just want to put that on the table right now. If I'm hanging out with any of y'all and we go to a restaurant and they're like, we have dog on this menu, I will for sure order it.
that would be the first thing I order
I
as well,
want
by the
to.
way.
Like,
Just to try,
please.
or it's like your favorite thing?
No, to
No,
try. I've
just
never
to
had
try.
it.
I've never had it before, but it could be my new favorite thing.
It could
Who
be.
knows?
Yeah,
I might
I've
just be
eaten
stalking
horse.
strays on the street.
Yeah, I've eaten a
Um,
horse in Malta, not a whole horse. An entire horse would be an indulgence, but I've eaten part of a horse.
I've tried
Uh,
horse before. I didn't like it.
No, I didn't like it either.
Yeah.
Too rich for me.
It's
I-
really, I would think that it was, never mind.
No,
So,
but-
so anyway, so what I was saying is like, so I mean, there is nuance and there is different ideas that you can take from even like a culture that we now know had a lot of hatred, had a lot of bigotry, and they are all assholes. But there were some people in there that they're part of it, but they're not like super part of it. Some people go with the flow. However, if you're playing usually a character, they're usually like the representative of whatever group that they're identifying. So, that's a whole thing. So
Yeah.
I'm just throwing that out there. It probably didn't make any sense. Yeah, we can move on.
What I would ask from TK and Lisa, do you have any opposing views to what Alois said? Otherwise, we'll move on to the next question.
I feel like maybe
Oh,
like one thing could be like if it's a game where the player's goal is kind of like fighting against these tensions or oppression. Some people might enjoy playing a game like that,
Mhm.
but also there's people who like are like, this is my fantasy world where this is my hobby and free time, and I don't want to have to deal with real world
Yeah.
stuff like this also. And I could also get that.
Yeah. If you're playing a game that somehow, oh boy, that somehow like hinges on racial tension, I would not play it. I can understand why I guess some people would.
Mhm.
Session zeros, so many session zeros where we're talking about it and we just, you know what, because if you're sitting at a table and nobody's comfortable talking about race, you got the wrong table for that game. That's
don't
for
play
sure.
that game. Yeah.
Yeah,
It can be a
if you
case of
sit in
convincing the players.
if you sit in a session zero and somebody in your game is like, okay, well, I'm going to be a Confederate soldier, so I'd really like to use the N word. You got the wrong table for this game. Like, for me personally, if it's a game that has any racial tension, that racial tension has got to be like games up here, racial tensions and like the undercarriage, like for like Ravenloft or something like that, erased everything against the Vistani, and then just like if they run into tieflings, witchcraft, devilry, like there's some little jokes like that, but nobody's gonna like shut you out of their shop for it. I don't know. Racial tension stuff is real awkward for me because it's so easy to pick up and escalate. It's so easy to escalate as a DM.
I just know that myself as a gamer, because it was like the very first question that you asked is just like, how do you play somebody that's not you? I myself as a gamer and as a person, I have learned so much from gaming in those kind of situations where I'm playing the woman in a bad group. So like my character is getting sexually harassed, or if I'm playing somebody of a different, race than I am, and I'm seeing how the other people at the table are respond. Like I have learned so much by gaming that I wouldn't want to remove the possibility for people to learn things so that it's easier to consume the media, if that makes sense.
No, I understand. I just like, it goes back to me for punching up. It's like, I didn't come be part of this game so I could give you free education. You know what I mean?
Well, definitely
it's
that,
like,
yes.
Yeah, for sure. But it's like, for me personally, it's a little awkward. I can understand where being a person from like a point of privilege, like if I were playing a disabled character in a game, because I have the privilege of being able-bodied. If I were playing a disabled person, like obviously I'm going to learn a lot more things, but I feel so awkward, I think, being in a position where like a disabled person at the table is going to have to teach me as opposed to me learning on my own time. I don't know. It's just very awkward for me. For me personally, I wouldn't play a game that hinges on racial tensions unless like we had like some serious session zeros. We've got like physical safety tools at the table, and everybody at the game is comfortable talking about race, but I can see how it would be beneficial to other people in a safe environment.
So I think we'll be able to fit one last question in before we wrap up. I feel much like yesterday, this panel could probably go on for longer, but sadly we do have something else coming up soon, and
they're canceled. They're canceled. This is us.
We've
this
got
is
lots
actually the better conversation. I don't know who you have on after us, but
it's just something about art. I don't know. Art. Who cares about art? Anyone can do a drawing.
Arts. Writing only.
Doesn't matter if the drawing's good. Anyone can do it.
It's on the internet now. It's mine.
I will actually say, on the lines of racial tensions, colonialism, and the like, there is a very well written little indie game by the name of Dog Eat Dog. It isn't pleasant. It isn't something that you're just going to whip out at a convention and just hope a bunch of randos sign up for and enjoy. It's a game that you do need a lot of preparation for. Everyone needs to buy into it and sign up for the fact that this could be quite an emotional undertaking. But I do recommend it if people are interested in exploring that in a safe group. Dog Eat Dog is a very well put together indie game.
So to jump on that, I know because you said you wanted to move on to the next question.
I did,
but that just sparked something in me though. That's, I think, the difference between the like going back to, you know, orcs and stuff like that in fantasy RPGs. The whole idea of it happening in the game, that's not necessarily the bad thing. The bad thing is like it should be fun to do this. So it's just like, hey, you're a slaver. Isn't it so fun that we're enslaving these people? Now, you know, if it was like you're a slaver and you have to do this, but you know, it's not fun, but it's part of your culture and you're like, you're struggling with it and stuff like that. That's one thing. But if it's just like, hey, I bagged 2 more slaves. Yay. That gets us 5 points. You know, it's like, I guess that's where it kind of fits in there. Cause it's like, it's a game, but how much of it is fun when you're dealing with that sort of stuff? It looked like TK was kind of nodding when I said that.
This is next question.
All right.
Probably, yes.
Okay, next question. Lisa, I would like to ask, and this one isn't specifically about characters, but I think it's a good question. How do you balance having a difficult or hard setting, so something where the environment and the creatures around you are punishing, let's say, or character relationships? So how do you balance having a difficult setting or character relationship and creating a DM versus player situation?
I don't know if I fully understand that question.
So, for instance, if let's say the setting itself is hostile to the characters, how do you prevent it from feeling hostile out of character? If you're constantly, I guess, on a downward slope through what you're going through, almost like a dialed up Call of Cthulhu session, for instance.
Gosh, I feel like I have 2 thoughts. One is that if characters or players are struggling to use their imagination and all of their resources to try to combat that environment, being a generous DM and allowing them to be imaginative, allowing them to attempt things, and then blaming the roles if things go poorly. But the second thing is that I feel like I've mostly experienced this for streamed games, but I think it is really important for home games as well, is having a cooldown after your session, where everyone can kind of talk about like, what was your favorite part of the game? What were parts you didn't like so much? I think that's really important so that feelings in game don't kind of bleed into real life. And folks also know you're not trying to be a jerk about it. It's just, it's part of what the game is. And then I guess speaking of those sorts of sessions, having a session 0 so players know that's what they're signing up for is also important.
Yeah, it's a bit like you don't want to spring a horror genre on someone who thinks they're signing up to light and fluffy fantasy.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Let's go for a few minutes longer because there's only one more question in our chat, and I would like everyone to answer this one, if that's all right with the panelists.
I'm fine.
I'm cool with it.
Okay. Someone says, I apologize if this was already asked. How do you work out a character's story arc and changing, growing through the course of the campaign as a player? So looking to you as players. Do you tie it to story points, level advancement, or do you just let it happen organically through roleplay? So big question. If you need that repeated, any of the panelists is in the Zoom chat that we have. TK, asking you first of all, how do you manage your characters, I guess, growth?
So, as both a DM and a player, I let it happen organically through RP. As a GM, I am an improvisational GM, which means that I don't tie the expectations of the character's growth to necessary points in the story, unless it's like a streamed game and it's like this would be more impactful if this came up in episode 12. um but if they're having a conversation, and stuff just grows through role play, that's totally different. I will alter my views and my beliefs as they do. When I'm a player, I just go through RP because I never know when level advancement is going to come up. So it's like, and I don't know, and I sometimes don't know how the GM does level advancement. I'm usually a person who's like, "Oh, you've got this new thing. Like, how did you get it or something? They stayed in the lab. Now you have this thing." Unless it's like a streamed game and we're short on time. But I never know when a GM is gonna allow that for me, so I just let it happen through RP.
Perfect. And what about you, Lisa?
I'm the same. I let things happen organically through role playing. For streamed games as a player, I'll sometimes bug TK and be like, well, there's this like really like key part of my story that I'd love to come up this season. And so we'll talk through that. So I think just DMs working with their players in general, I'm a big fan of communication about a game. Like if you feel like as a player your story arc hasn't been getting as much attention in game as you'd like just let your DM know,
Yeah.
talk through it with them.
For sure.
But they ask like, do you tie stuff to level advancement? I kind of like the opposite. For example, I'm GMing a game of Afterlife Wandering Souls right now, and I really like at the end of the session you kind of go through a list of questions, including, do you feel like anything like really major happened with your character's story arc? Did they grow as a character? And then you kind of reward XP for that.
Okay, so kind of like if you're familiar, like a Pendragon winter phase between sessions. It's like downtime essentially, where you can narrate how your character has advanced.
I think Burning Wheel does something similar.
Mhm.
I'm not sure.
And finally, last but by no means least, Aloy, what do you have to add to the idea of character growth through a session, how you manage it as a player specifically?
Yeah, as a player, I have two answers, of course. So the first answer is pretty similar to what TK and Lisa said. It should happen organically, and as a GM, this is how I do it as also as a player. But like, if I spent like say the whole last story talking to people, then it makes sense for me to spend points on communication skills. If I didn't throw one punch, I probably should not raise my fighting skills. So really means so you should only be able to really raise the things that you've been using, because that's how you get better at things. So I would say that first. The second thing is the game 7th Sea 2nd edition actually has their XP mechanic is tied directly to whatever your story is. So what you say is like, what's the big thing that you want? Like, oh, I want, membership in this, guild or whatever. Well, membership in that guild is a 4-point, bonus thing, of 4-point feat in this case, right? So you'd be like, cool. So what are the 4 things that need to happen for you to get that? And then when you have achieved those 4 things, then you get that thing. So it's not even points. It's like, it's directly tied to the story. So you're going to be more motivated to make it part of the story as opposed to doing other things over here, and then saying, well, I spend 4 points over here, even though it's not really connected. So there you go. So two answers, similar, but yeah.
No, it's the tried and tested, and it works. The method of basically you put ticks next to the skills that you use during the course of the game, so you don't have to just recall everything 6 sessions later, let's say, and then you can look back at it and say, okay, so now I want to put points, as you say, in communications, because your character's been the face of the group, for instance. So no, that makes perfect sense to me. Now I'm going to spend last couple of minutes, so don't leave yet, viewers. Last couple of minutes doing a couple of things. First is to say thank you so much, everyone who has donated to our charities during the course of this stream. This entire convention is for charity. We're not making people pay to play games, not making people pay to attend panels, and we have these 2 charities. They're on the onyxpathcon.com. We would love it if you could donate as much as you can afford reasonably to the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, or the Bodhana Group, or both. They're both 2 fantastic causes, and everyone who has contributed so far, we really appreciate it. And of course, there are discounts for our RPGs on the website that you can partake in. They run until the end of today. But most importantly of all, I have been joined by 3 fantastic panelists, and we've had a brilliant discussion, incredibly open and honest, and I really appreciate that. And so please, over to the 3 of you to promote whatever you're working on, whatever you want to sell, because I know you all make fantastic products, and just because this is an Onyx Path convention doesn't mean you can't promote your own games. So take it away, TK. What of your games would you like people to be looking at right now?
Unfortunately, everything that I'm working on currently is under NDA. But if you want to stop by the D&D Twitch Tuesday nights and watch Mythic Odysseys of Theros with Indoor Recess, I am the DM for that game. It's lots of comedy, a bunch of young heroes that have gotten into a hero academy and are going to become champions of the gods. Maybe we'll smooch a Hydra. I don't know. I'm feeling kind of sassy lately.
It's a group effort.
That's got to be 7
Check
jealous
that
heads.
out.
And what about you, Lisa Penrose?
Well, goodness. You can find me on the interwebs at Lisa Penrose. That's Lisa spelled with a Y, Lysa. I do a whole bunch of D&D things. If you like Dungeons and Dragons in particular, but TRPGs in general, come give me a follow. Also follow Dungeon Masters Guild at DMs_guild. If you're feeling generous this weekend, certainly donate to the wonderful causes Onyx Path is supporting. We also have 3 bundles, charity bundles on Dungeon Masters Guild right now that are supporting Black Lives Matter, the NAAC Legal Defense and Educational Fund, and the National Police Accountability Project. So if those causes are important to you, go to dungeonmastersguild.com and click the big banner on the top. That'll show you those bundles, and also a bunch of Black creators who we are spotlighting and donating our proceeds to the charity of their choice as well.
Thank you so much. And Eloy, what would you like to promote?
Well, I mean, the easiest way to find me is to go, at Third Eye Games on Facebook or Twitter. My big games that I have currently are, Part-Time Gods, Ninja Crusade. I've been mostly highlighting Sins of the Father, which is a game about you kind of inheriting, a legacy of like doing very bad things to people. And so that's kind of what I've been highlighting now, obviously, in the times that we are in, because, I feel like we are all kind of, the system and, racism and all that stuff is all stuff that we've inherited. And it's kind of up to us to break that cycle. Or maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's our kids. I don't even know whose job it is. So anyway, so that's kind of the game that I've been mostly highlighting, Sins of the Father. Otherwise, you can't miss me. There isn't anybody else in the world with the name Eloy Lasanta.
I will also say a big props to Eloy. If you follow Eloy on any form of social media, you will receive an education, fantastic education on the artist, the musician, who was, is, and forever will be Prince. Magnificent performer. Aloy is a master when it comes to knowledge of Prince's works, and I know it's completely off topic of what we're discussing, but if you're a fan of Prince, and I know many people are, you will learn a lot by listening to Aloy.
if you gonna choose a musician or performer artist to be obsessed with, you could do a whole lot worse than Prince.
Oh,
So-
most certainly.
True.
Okay, well, with that said, we're now going to do the awkward wave goodbye as Travis brings an end to our stream. So bye-bye, everybody.
Bye,
Thank you for
everybody.
watching.